So my name is Martin Penny, and I'm the head of unit for communication in the executive agency for the European Research Council. And it's my pleasure to moderate this webinar today. We have a great line of speakers who will provide you with information from different insights on the ERC application process. I have to say, personally, it's always a pleasure to work with researchers in Moldova. In previous roles, I've worked extensively with Moldova, and those of you who are online who I've worked in the research community or research scene in Europe a little bit longer may remember I was the commission official who worked with the Academy of Science to negotiate the association of Moldova to the 7th framework program. And of course, Moldova was the first Eastern Partnership country to associate to the framework programs for research and innovation. So it's a real pleasure to be back and work with you again today. I'll be joined in chairing by my colleague, Monica Sonia. I am aware that when it comes to the questions and answers, some of you may be more comfortable expressing your question in Romanian rather than English. So if that is the case, Monica will chair the session when it comes to questions in Romanian, but we'll explain the logistics of that a little later. So the purpose of today's session is to raise awareness about the opportunities for all of you from the ERC for funding, receiving grants from the ERC, and also to provide some advice and guidance to support the researchers in Moldova in preparing successful applications. So this morning we'll have an overview of what the funding schemes are, what's available for you, the application procedures, and the evaluation process. You'll also have some practical advice and guidance shared by some existing grantees and also one of the panel members that has worked on the evaluation panels, and also learn about the support that's available locally through the Horizon Europe National Office in Moldova. There'll be 2 question and answer sessions to engage directly with the speakers, and we will ask questions via Slido, but we'll give you the details of that later. But first of all, let me introduce the speakers briefly. They will introduce themselves when they come to give their presentations. But I'm pleased that we have Alexandra Dusa, who's a project advisor in the executive agency for the European Research Council as well. We also have Aurelia Hanganu, who's the national contact point for Moldova. I'm very pleased that we have 3 people who are here to be able to give you real practical advice on their experience of the ERC processes. And that's Laura Visu-Petra, who is a professor of developmental psychology. And then we have 2 ERC grantees, Alida Timar-Gabor, who's a starting grantee, have received a starting grantee from the ERC, and Alexandra Baneu, who's also received a starting grant. I beg your pardon, Alida, I should say, received a starting grant and a consolidator grant. So she's in a really good experience to be able to present to you how to receive not just 1 grant, but also 2 grants. If I can give some housekeeping rules before we start, if I can ask that you keep your cameras and your microphones off at all times. We will ask the questions in Slido, and my colleagues Clara and John will share the Slido code with you shortly. And you can ask questions, as I said, in English, but if you prefer, if it's easier to ask your question in Romanian, that's also fine to ask in Romanian as well. And we will provide more information on some of the points which the speakers may make with some links and helpful tips in the chat, so you'll be able to access that whilst you're whilst you're listening to the presentations as well. As I've said, the session will be recorded, and the recording and all of the slides from the presentations will be available on our website in the coming days. But before that, I always think when we do these kinds of webinars, it's very different to when you work face-to-face with people. You don't get to see your audience in the same way. So it's always good to know who's here online. And so we have just some quick questions to get to know you. If I could ask you all to connect to Slido. The code is here on the screen. So if you either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and put in the code that you see on screen, and then we'll start the questions. We'll just give you a couple of minutes to scan and to access Slido. Okay, so the first question we're asking really simply, Can you tell us which country you're joining us from? And the answers will appear on screen as you fill in Slido. So interestingly, we would expect a lot of people coming from Moldova, but interestingly, we see people from other countries, a number of people from Spain, also from Romania, Croatia, and the Czech Republic. We only have 7 responses yet, if perhaps some more, if we have 42 online. So if 32 attendees, so perhaps if more people can respond. Also from Croatia, from Switzerland. Up to 12 responses. But as we'd hoped, the majority of people are joining us this morning are from Moldova, which is great to see. So also from Slovakia. Okay, thank you. Then we go to the second question, which is really to have a gauge of how familiar you are with the application process. Are you very familiar with it? Have some familiarity with it, or you're not familiar at all, just so we can see where people are in this respect. So there's some degree of familiarity, that's good. So some people are very familiar, some people it's new, and that's fine, we'll cater to you as well, but it's good to know that there's a substantial number of you who have some familiarity with the application process. That's great, thank you. And we move on to the third question, which is really looking, if you're thinking of applying, fill this one in. So how many years of experience do you have since completing your PhD? 175, which may be a typo, I guess. Or maybe not. And you'll see those of you who are familiar with the ERC application process will know why we're asking this, because we're looking at the windows for the eligibility windows to see what type of grant you'd be most interested in. I see the big numbers are 2, some 3 and 4, which would fit more into the starting grants. And then the 12, 25, 14, and 75 would fit more into the advanced grants. We don't have anybody in the COG window. Perhaps some of the people with 12, depending on some of the other factors relating to their experience after their PhD. Now, thank you very much for that. It's always good to see who we have online. So Clara, if I can ask you to stop sharing the screen. We'll just take you quickly through the program for the day. So the first part of the session will cover an overview of the ERC funding schemes. And one of the things which I think is important to underline is there are opportunities for every researcher here in the room, because the whole point of the ERC is it's open to researchers from any nationality working with a host institution in a member state of the EU or an associated country like Moldova. And it's a bottom-up program. So it's you who decide on the research priority. So there's opportunities for every researcher that's connected today. So the first part of the session will cover an overview of the ERC funding schemes and also provide some insights on the support available from the national contact point in Moldova. That presentation will be held in Romanian. Then there'll be a first questions and answer session before we move into the second part of the presentation, which will offer practical tips from an ERC panel member and testimonials from ERC grantees, followed by a question and answer session. I should just already announce in advance that one of our speakers, Laura Visu-Petra, will need to leave the webinar a little earlier. But don't worry, if you're asking questions to her and we're not able to answer them before she needs to leave, we'll ensure that they're collected and we answer those questions in writing afterwards. So with no further ado, I'd like to give the floor to the first speaker, who's my colleague Alexandra Dusa, who's a project advisor in the scientific department of the executive agency for the ERC, and she will give an overview of the ERC funding schemes. So Alexandra, the floor is yours. If you could share your screen and start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share. Do you see my screen?
We do indeed, yes.
Okay. So good morning. I'm Alexandra Dusa. So I'm a scientific project officer in the LS7 panel here at the ERC Executive Agency. And it's my pleasure to give you today an overview on the European Research Council funding opportunities. So I'll start with a little bit of an introduction into the ERC. Then I will walk you through how to apply for an ERC grant, giving you some little tips that might help you along the process. And then I'll end with some Moldovan statistics regarding ERC applications and some future opportunities that are available. So as you may already know, the ERC is part of the Horizon, Horizon Europe, which is the EU's key funding program for research and innovation. It is part of Pillar 1, Excellent Science, and it has a budget of around 16 billion euros, which represents about 17% of the entire Horizon Europe budget. I won't go through all these figures, but I will just point out that since its creation in 2007, there have been over 14,000 top researchers that have been funded by the ERC. There have been over 90,000 researchers and other professionals that have been employed in ERC-funded research teams, and over 220,000 articles from ERC projects have been published in scientific journals. And also, there are 14 Nobel Prize winners that are part of the ERC grantee family. So what sets the ERC apart from other funding programs within Horizon Europe is the fact that it is led by the Scientific Council. So the Scientific Council is a group of 22 eminent scientists and scholars who have full authority over strategy, and they're the governing body of the ERC. They established a work program for the implementation of the ERC activities, and they do so together, led by Professor Maria Leptin, who is the ERC president, who's also being helped by 3 vice presidents, each representing one of the 3 domains. So one from life sciences, one from social sciences and humanities, and one from physical sciences and engineering. Now, the ERCEA, which is the ERC Executive Agency, which is the place that I work at, what we do is we implement the ERC strategy as set by the Scientific Council. And we also manage the ERC operations, mostly organizing the peer review evaluations and following up on the funded projects. We are a staff of about 500, of which around 130 have scientific backgrounds. So what are ERC grants? Well, they are long-term grants that are awarded to individual researchers from all over the world, as Martin already mentioned, to pioneering projects that are in any field of frontier research. So they can be in life sciences, physical sciences and engineering, or social sciences and humanities. So they are open to excellent and independent researchers, regardless of nationality, age, or gender. And what's also interesting and what sets us apart from other funding programs is the fact that there are no thematic priorities for the ERC. So it's fully bottom-up, investigator-driven frontier research. So it is you, the scientists, decide what you think is important, what you want to study. So the ERC grants so there are several types of ERC grants. There are the 3 what we call main grants. So these are the starting grant, the consolidated grant, and the advanced grants. So these are based on the level of experience of the PI, so the so-called academic age of the PI. So the starting grants are available to the youngest academic age researchers. So those are the ones that are between 2 and 7 years after their PhD defense. These grants are for 1.5 million euros, and they cover 5 years. Next up, we have the consolidated grants available for slightly more mature, academically speaking, PIs who are between 7 and 12 years after their PhD. These grants are for 2 million euros and also cover 5 years. And finally, we have the advanced grants for the most senior researchers and those that have a significant track record of significant research achievements in their field. And these grants are 2.5 million euros for 5 years. In addition to these 3 main grants, we have a smaller grant called Proof of Concept. So this is 150,000 euros grant, and it's only available to PIs that already hold one of the other main grants. The idea of the proof of concept grant is to bridge the gap between research and the earliest stage of marketable innovation. So to take an example from the life sciences, say that you have worked on a specific clinical assay in one of your main grants, what you could do is apply for a proof of concept grant and try to, for example, do perhaps a little clinical study in a few patients or a few healthy volunteers to test out your clinical assay and see if it has any potential to actually come to the clinic. And finally, we also have the synergy grants, which are collaborative grants. So here it's between 2 and 4 principal investigators that apply together as a group. Here, the maximum amount is 10 million euros for the grant, and they go on for 6 years. And what's interesting is that here one PI can be fully based outside the EU member state or associate country. So in addition to the amounts I just mentioned for each of these grants, it is also possible to request additional funds up to 1 million euros for all of them, except for the proof of concept grant. And these can be awarded for startup costs for moving to a European member state or associated country from outside, for access to large facilities, for purchasing major equipment, or for other major experimental and fieldwork costs, excluding personnel costs. So why should you apply for an ERC grant? Well, the ERC offers you independence, recognition, and visibility to work on a topic of entirely your own choice. You can gain financial autonomy for 5 years. It will put you in a position to negotiate the best working conditions with the host institution. It will also allow you to attract excellent team members and collaborators from anywhere in the world. And what's also really nice and important is that ERC grants are fully portable. So you can move with the grant to any place in a Europe member state or associate country if you so wish, after you've already started the project, or even before, if you so desire. And it can also help secure additional funding. So at the ERC, excellence is the only evaluation criterion. So the excellence is measured in 2 categories: the excellence of the research project and that of the principal investigator. So for the research project, excellence is a measure of its groundbreaking nature, ambition, and feasibility. And for the principal investigator, excellence is a measure of intellectual capacity of the PI, their creativity, and their commitment to the project. What's new as of the work program 2024, the Scientific Council has decided that the panels, when they evaluate the proposal, should primarily focus on the excellence of the project. They will still look, of course, at the ability of the PI to carry out the project, but the focus is on the research project itself. So the ERC has a 2-step evaluation procedure for the individual grants, for the starting, consolidator, and advanced grants. So the step 1 starts with a remote assessment of the proposals that have been submitted to the different panels. Each proposal submitted to a panel is evaluated by 4 panel members, and they do this remotely. They act at step 1 as generalists, so they look at the proposal synopsis, so the part P1, the proposal synopsis, and the CV of the PI as generalists, and what they're focusing on is feasibility, the feasibility of the project. Once they have written their remote reviews, they come together to Brussels for a panel meeting, and they discuss together each and every proposal that has been submitted to a particular panel. As a group, they come to a conclusion as to the score that each proposal will receive. And there are 3 scores that are possible, so A, B, or C. The Bs and the Cs are proposals that will not continue to step 2. And those applicants that have obtained a B or C at step 1 will receive feedback. The feedback includes all the individual reviews that were provided by the panel members in the remote phase, as well as the panel comment that is a summary of the discussion of the panel during the panel meeting. Then there are also some resubmission restrictions for the Bs and the Cs. So the proposals that obtain a B at step 1 have to wait 1 year before they can reapply, and the ones that obtain a C at step 1 have to wait 2 years before they can reapply. The proposals that obtain an A go on to step 2. And here we have another new feature as of last year. The Scientific Council has decided to introduce a 44 proposal limit to pass the step 2, and this is for purely logistical reasons, because it's difficult for panel members to carry out more than 44 interviews during a 1-week panel meeting at step 2. So 44 proposals only can pass to step 2, but that doesn't mean that if the panel you cannot have in a particular panel more than 44 A's. So if the panel members decide that there are more than 44 excellent proposals at step 1, they will rank them, and all the ones that are beyond 44 will obtain a new score called A not invited. And these proposals have no resubmission restrictions, so they are free to apply the following year. So the 44 A's that do go on to step 2 will again undergo a remote assessment. Again, per proposal, we have 4 panel members. And in addition to the panel members, there are also external reviewers. So these are experts that are nominated by the panel members at step 1, and they cover the specific areas of the proposal, the different research areas that are covered in a proposal. So they also provide their assessment remotely. At step 2, both the panel members and the external reviewers look at, in addition to Part B1, they look at Part B2, which is the full proposal and the proposal budget, and they concentrate on the methodology that has been described. Once the remote phase is over again, they come together to Brussels for a panel meeting. And in addition to discussing together the assessment that they provided remotely, they also have interviews with the applicants. And as a result of that panel meeting with interviews, they make the final funding decision. So I will now walk you through some practical information on how to apply for an ERC grant. Step 1 seems very obvious, but you need to get the information as early as you can. Get familiar with the European Commission's funding and tender portal, download all the templates. Of course, I'd like to encourage you to read all the call documents, so information for applicants, work program, frequently asked questions. They may be a little bit intimidating documents because they're quite long, but really they include a lot of what you need to know, so very important information. Talk to your institution's grant office. If you're able to, talk to ERC grantees. And of course, please contact us to ask any questions that you might have ahead of the submission deadline. One other thing you need to do straight away, in case you envision having some collaborators for your project, make sure you have the written consent before the submission deadline. A simple email exchange is sufficient for this. And here I just, there are links to some other useful pages that you can obtain more information on the application process. The next important thing is to choose your host institution. So this is entirely up to you, as long as it's located in an EU member state or associated country. You can change it, as I mentioned, during the project's life. And you can already start negotiating with the PI about your equipment, position, administrative support, etc. There's a rumor going around that somehow the quality or the fame of the host institution can affect your chances of success. And I'd like to tell you this is absolutely not true. The panel members are very well briefed on the fact that the host institution is not an evaluation criterion. Next, you need to choose the grant type and to make sure that you are eligible to apply. And here I'd like to remind you that eligibility window for the starting and the consolidated grants is calculated according to the 1st of January of the year of the call. And the reference date is the certified date of the successful defense of your first PhD degree, in case you have more than one. If you have previously applied to an ERC call, make sure that you look at the resubmission restrictions. Keep in mind that all PIs need to work a minimum of 50% in a EU or member state or associated country. And in addition to that, they have to have a specific time commitment on the project, depending on the type of grant that they have. So it's minimum 50% for starting grant, 40% for consolidator, or 30% for advanced or synergy. The other thing you should check is whether you qualify for some eligibility extensions. So these are possible for starting and consolidated grant for a number of cases. One of the most common ones is for maternity leave for our female applicants. So they automatically get 18 months per child, regardless of whether they had given birth before or after their PhD. And then there are a number of other possibilities, so paternity leave, long-term illness, military service. Make sure that you look into this and you provide the relevant documentation for each of these cases. And there's no limit to the total years of extension. So you can combine some of these if this is your case. Then you should decide when to apply. And here there's another rumor that you should wait until the end of your eligibility window so that you accumulate enough seniority, because only then you will be competitive. So this is actually not true. So what you see here is that the success rate is virtually flat across the eligibility window. So really, the only thing that should govern your decision is when you feel ready, when you feel that you have enough experience and that you feel that you're ready to write a good proposal and you have a nice idea. That's the only thing that should determine when you are ready to apply. Of course, another important step is choosing your panel from the 28 panels that are available currently at the ERC. So we have 28 panels, each has a title, subtitle, and a number of descriptors. So please make sure that you choose the one that most closely covers the topics that are mentioned in your proposal. Choosing the panel is, of course, very, very important. And the proposals are assigned to the panel that you initially choose. So you can also flag a secondary panel if you feel that the topics that are explored in your proposal really are covered by more than one panel. And in this case, you need to quickly explain the interdisciplinary nature of your proposal. There is a box in Part B1 where you can explain that. And just to let you know that transfer of proposals between panels may occur if there's a clear mistake on the part of the applicant, or if the panel chairs decide that the necessary expertise is available in a different panel than the one that the PI initially submitted to. There's a rumor here as well that somehow you need to choose the panel, quote unquote, strategically, and that some panels have higher chances of success than others. So this is absolutely not true. Please just choose the panel that best fits your proposal. So the budget is distributed among the panels as a function of demand. So the more proposals are submitted to a panel, the higher the budget of the panel, but the success rate is equal among panels. So when you prepare your application, keep in mind that there are two main parts. So you have the administrative forms. So this is Part A that you fill in online. And then you have the scientific part, Part B1 and Part B2, which is what the panel members see. Then you also have any annexes that you can that you upload if this is your case. Well, actually, so there are annexes that everybody has to upload. So the statement of support of the host institution and a copy of your PhD or equivalent. But in case you also have any eligibility extension, then this is where you also upload those documents. Do not try to upload any additional information here, because the panel members do not see this Part A administrative forms. The only thing they see from that is the budget. So what they look at is Part B1, which is the extended synopsis and the CV and track record, and the Part B2, which is the full scientific proposal and the funding ID. So as you're thinking about your proposal, we'd like to encourage you to carefully choose your descriptors and free keywords. This is because they will influence which panel will evaluate your proposal and are also the starting point of the allocation of the proposal to the panel member based on their expertise. And it will also determine whether a cross-panel evaluation is necessary in case some of the topics that are explored in your proposal are not available in that one panel that you submitted to, but are available in a different panel. Couple of rumors that I need to quickly dispel. One is that somehow the panel descriptors represent ERC scientific priorities. This is absolutely not true. As I already mentioned before, there are no scientific priorities for the ERC. So the descriptors are just there to help you in making your decision where to submit your proposal. And then another rumor is that the more cross-panel descriptors that you indicate, the higher the funding chances, because like that, you emphasize the interdisciplinary of your proposal. And this is also not true. The ERC does not prefer interdisciplinary proposal, just like it doesn't prefer non-interdisciplinary proposal. All proposals are evaluated exactly the same So you only should use cross-panel descriptors, the ones that you really feel are important for your proposal. So as you're ready to start drafting part B1, and you're looking at the research project, as I mentioned, as of 2024, the evaluation is primarily focused on the groundbreaking nature, ambition, and feasibility. We no longer have an explicit reference to high risk, high gain, which was there previously. And the reason why that is because the Scientific Council decided that groundbreaking, ambitious, and feasible are better descriptors of the type of work they want to fund. And anyway, the ERC will always by default encourage risky research. There's also no longer an explicit reference to novel methodologies. And this is because the Scientific Council realized that novel methodologies is, of course, a positive element, but is not strictly necessary for an excellent proposal. So you can have an excellent idea that you can carry out with conventional methods, and that's fine. So here's some questions to ask yourself as you're drafting your Part B1 research project. So think about whether your project is new. Is it innovative? Is it bringing in new solutions or theories? Very importantly, does it promise to go substantially beyond the state of the art? Think big. You know, make sure that the idea that you have really needs an ERC grant to carry it out. Think about your hypothesis. Think about supporting evidence. Think about, of course, feasibility. Think about whether your goals are realistic. Very importantly, you should mention why you feel that your proposal is timely. You know, why hasn't it been done in the past? Why is it important to do it now? You should always have a plan for managing the risks and try to not have the risk too early on in the project so you don't jeopardize the feasibility of the entire project. You also should think about why you are the best person to carry it out. So know your competitors, know the state of play, know what else is out there, and why your scientific approach is better compared to what's already out there. And in case you do have collaborations, you have to make you have to show that you are in the driver's seat. So it's you driving the collaborations. It's you driving, leading the project, although you will have some collaborations. Now, the second part of Part B1 is your CV and track record. So here again, as of last year, the Scientific Council has decided to no longer have prescriptive PI profiles, and instead there are 3 sections that you need to fill in. So first one is just personal details, just the normal information on your educations, qualifications, current positions, and so on. The second category is the research achievement and peer recognition. So here's where you should list all your achievements that demonstrate how you've pushed the field forward with an emphasis on more recent achievements. You should list prizes, fellowships, publications, academy memberships, anything that shows that you are at the forefront of your field. What's also interesting now is that you can provide a short factual narrative on the significance of these achievements. So rather than just listing a number of papers, you can specifically draw the attention of the reviewer to why a particular paper was important, why you were involved why your involvement in a particular conference, for example, was really important for that particular field, and so on. And finally, you have the additional information section. So here, the Scientific Council wanted to give you, the researchers, the opportunity to add any additional information that was not already added in the second section, to provide a little bit of context to the reviewers when they assess your achievements and peer recognition. So here you can include things like career breaks. You can include things like diverse career paths. So for example, say that you started to work out in an industry and then you decided that you would like to come back to academic life to study a particular question. This is the kind of information that you can provide here. And it's also your opportunity, as I said, to explain, for example, career breaks. So just don't leave any question marks for the reviewers. Make sure that you already respond to all the questions. You can anticipate that the questions they might have. So some tips for writing this part, the CV and the track record. Of course, I'd like to recommend that you use this template as much as possible. Explain what has been your own contribution to your publications and how they impacted the field. You have to really convince the panel that you are at the forefront of your research field. In case you need to explain different publishing habits in your particular field or country, please go ahead and do that. And feel free to describe any activity that can indicate scientific maturity. And as I already mentioned, if you know that you have some gaps in your CV, you can go ahead and explain them in the additional information section. And like that, the reviewers already have the answer. They don't have to wonder why there are, for example, gaps in your CV. So one rumor here is that one needs very high impact factor publications like Science and Nature in order to succeed. This is absolutely not the case. You do not need those high impact journals publications to succeed, but you have to make sure that you have some publications without your former supervisors, as that may raise some doubts about your scientific independence. So there's some questions to ask yourself as you're drafting your CV and track record. Think about how you have shown your scientific leadership. You also have to convince the reviewers that you can work independently and to manage a 5-year project with a substantial budget. So this is where you should list prior research endeavors, explain your role and contribution. If you're internationally active, mention that. Of course, if you have spoken at international conferences, served in committees, any of that information will help the reviewers secure a good impression of your scientific maturity. One rumor that I'd like to dispel as well is that an applicant needs to have supervised a certain number of students in order to be successful. This is absolutely not true. So the Scientific Council has looked at this in detail and concluded that the supervision element becomes a proxy that kind of reflects the excellence of the environment, because as you can imagine, larger labs that are very well funded will afford more opportunities for a more senior researcher to supervise more junior researchers, but that's not the case for smaller, less well-funded labs. Because they realized that this is not a fair measure for good mentorship, they concluded that this does not need to be provided. So you will not be penalized for not having supervised any junior researchers, but if you do, of course, you should include it. So part B1 is all about finding the right balance, because it gives you the first impression of your project and yourself, and will determine if you pass the step 2. So these may seem very obvious, but please avoid jargon. Do not oversell your idea. You're talking to scientists, so just explain it in a scientific way. Of course, make sure there are no typos. Make sure it's accessible to a generalist. So have it proofread by as many people as you can. And of course, make sure that there are proper legends to figures tables and the figure axes are clearly visible. Now you're ready to start drafting part B2. So part B2 is for filling in the details. So make sure that there's an obvious link between B1 and B2, of course. Do not introduce totally new concepts in B2 that were not mentioned in part B1. Use the full space available. You have 14 pages, so make good use of it. Make sure you give full references. Although you're not required to have a Gantt chart or anything like that, you should describe some sort of timeline just to introduce a little bit of order in your proposal. Do not simply repeat what you said in part B1. Rather go into the details on your methodology and the work plan. Explain your hypothesis and of course provide supporting evidence and preliminary data if you have it. Always provide some alternative strategies to mitigate risks. And for the main grants, of course, you should think of the project as a team. So you should explain involvement of the team members and collaborators, but remember that ERC main grant proposals are not consortia. So it's you, the PI, driving the proposal. The other important thing you need to do in part B2 is to explain properly your resources and budget, because the budget analysis will be carried out by the panel members in the step 2 evaluation. The panels have the responsibility to make sure that the resources requested are reasonable and well justified. That being said, the panels will not micromanage project finances. So, and they will not just make cuts across the board to proposals. So the only reason really for them to cut costs is when they have not been properly explained. And we have here 2 more rumors that we need to quickly dispel. One is that if you do not ask for large sums of money, there are no chances because only complex and expensive projects get funded. This is absolutely not true. There are many areas where it just doesn't make sense to ask for the maximum amount. And of course, rest assured, no grant was ever rejected for asking too few funds. So you should just ask what you feel is necessary to implement your project. And the second rumor is kind of the other side of the coin, is to ask, if you ask for funding beyond the max, the panel will automatically cut it down. This is also not true. So as I said, the only funding that will be cut down is the one that is not properly explained or motivated, or that's there just to kind of artificially inflate the budget. This is very obvious to panel members. So that would be cut. But everything that's well explained and motivated will not be cut. So say that you've passed step 1 and now you've been invited to the interview. What should you do to prepare? So first thing, of course, is to have a clear and representative set of slides and to focus on the science. As I already said, don't try to make a business presentation because you are talking to scientists, your peers. Of course, try to keep the time, try to anticipate questions, give to the point answers. So make sure that you don't just ramble on in an unfocused way. Know all the details of the proposal and methods in your research area, and also who are your main competitors. And if you have new preliminary data that you have obtained since you've initially submitted a proposal, do present it. The panels love to see that.
Alexandra, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
You're approaching the end of the time of your presentation. So if you can focus on the application things, we perhaps leave the statistics and so on for people to see afterwards.
Okay. So so I think I just have 2 more. So some typical reasons for rejection is that the scope of the project is too narrow or too broad or too unfocused. The groundbreaking aspects are not clear. So the proposal looks more like an incremental research. So this is not an ERC research project. If the PI is seen as too collaborative for the main grants and not as the main driver of the project. If the work plan is not detailed enough or unclear, if there's not enough risk management, or if Part B2 just did not give enough information on methodology. And on the PI part, if there's insufficient track record of the PI and it's not clear to the panel members if they can carry out the project. But the main point here is that if you're rejected, please just keep trying. So reapplications have a much higher success rate, and you have this precious feedback from panel members from the evaluation report. So use that information. And I think that's it. So we have here the call calendar for 2025. It's just the advanced grants that are coming up, the submission deadline at the end of August. And the 2026 calls are not yet open, but you should check the website for all the up-to-date information. And I'll just quickly also mention that you can find more information. So the ERC has put together some nice classes that you can find on YouTube that walk you through different different points that you need to think about when you're filling out your application. And should I skip then this part?
I think when it comes to the statistics, yes, I think we can, people can see those afterwards in your presentation.
All right. Okay. So then.
And if there's time, we can take them after the questions and answers.
All right. Okay. So I will. So maybe I should then say this very quickly, or.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that basically there are specific opportunities that you can take advantage of. So one, you can already, so I'll start with the third one. Apply to work in an ERC funded team. So you can look for jobs on your ERCEA using the ERC filter. So there you can find projects that have been ERC funded, and you can apply to work as a postdoc or PhD student or technician. And like that, you get some experience working in an ERC funded project. And then we have also the visiting fellowship, where you can visit an ERC lab and write your ERC application right after, or the mentoring initiative, where you can obtain personalized guidance on how to write the grant from former grantees or panel members. These first need to be set up for Moldova, so they're not yet set up, but there are instructions on the ERC website that can, the competent funding agencies there can find instructions on how to set it up so that the researchers can take advantage. So my take-home message is that you need to invest in research and into R&I, and use these ERC instruments that I just mentioned. So the visiting fellowships, and the mentoring initiative. And for you, the researchers, really excellence is broad. So any great idea has a chance. So go ahead and give it a chance to apply. And I'll end here. Sorry for going over time.
And sorry for cutting you off a
Yeah,
little,
no.
Alexandra, but thank you for the very clear and comprehensive presentation. I think everyone in the audience has seen that there's opportunities for all of them there, and hopefully you've whetted their appetites in starting writing proposals. Clara, if I could ask if you could just share the screen again with the Slido code. So the questions and answers will now be opened. And so for the opportunity for you to answer the questions, ask questions, I beg your pardon, the questions and answer session will come after the next presentation. But if you'd like to ask a question, please submit it in writing via Slido. And as I said before, you can do these in English. If you prefer to do it in Romanian because it's easier for you to do so, that's also fine. Okay, so hopefully everyone has now accessed Slido. So I'd like to give the floor to our second speaker, who's Aurelia Hanganu, who's the national contact point for the European Research Council in Moldova. So Clara, if you could stop sharing the screen, and we hand over to Aurelia to share her screen and start her presentation. Aurelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Martin. Thank you,
Aurelia, I
colleagues.
understand you're speaking Romanian, right?
No, actually, when I saw the audience, I thought that the Romanian would be not so comfortable for all of them. So I'll try to make this presentation shortly in English, and sorry for possible mistakes in my in my presentations.
Thank you. No, thank you very much.
Just in brief about the instruments that we are providing here in Moldova from our National Agency for Research and Development. Concerning the ERC competition, I know I especially put this logo here on my first page because I know very well that the European Research Council is established by the European Union, but funded by the European Union is the goal that all researchers trying to participate in the ERC competition would like to have. And in this order, we as NCP in Moldova and together with the National Horizon Europe office here are providing the general portfolio of instruments and services that is in all NCP portfolio here. But I would like to underline some specific instrument that we have and that could be very helpful for writing ERC project. One of them is Diaspora Engagement Hub and the opportunity and possibility to invite experts, Moldovan experts established abroad, for specific reason. For example, to conduct a workshop here, to organize a practical seminar on writing project, or to give consultancy on specific aspect in the writing project. We already tested this instrument and already have 2 visits of a Norwegian established researcher and USA established researcher here, and we saw that it was a very high interest to participate in. To assist the researcher in finding possible host institution as far as we saw the interest of Moldovan researcher to write project mostly with the European member states universities than the national one. Even we would like to have, of course, ERC here in Moldova, and I think that is a national goal for now. In this respect, we designed a state-funded project, a state-funded call, state-funded project possibility in National Agency for Research and Development. This is the call for writing project in Horizon Europe program. And the funding that are giving there are especially for proposal writing, effort for consultancy and training, which our researchers could get from any institution in country or abroad. There are also travel support in order to check the idea, in order to discuss with potential institution or with potential mentor or in other ERC opportunities. The call is continuous one, so we are accepting the proposals continuously. We are evaluating them monthly, and this month, in the end of the March, will be the first pool of the proposal that we will evaluate and to decide about financing or to resubmitting them for improvement. Another opportunity is given by the presence of our agency in the NCP Wideranjet project, which is intending or envisaging the researchers is giving two special opportunities. One opportunity is to travel to a possibly host institution or to mentor part in Europe, or even a brokerage event when the researcher could discuss about the improvement in his idea, and take best practices for this partnership. But mostly this is the pre-screening services which are given in the same framework, in the same project, and the opportunity to check the proposal before final submission in the call. So if speaking generally about the opportunities that our agency is giving, we may create this general picture from the ideas development and discussion with the ERC NCP or the Horizon Europe National Office here in Moldova, asking for guidance and asking for support about after that securing the preparation funding that NARD is offering for the researcher. Building partnership is not the correct word here, but the opportunity to be in a European institution abroad and to discuss about the possible hosting ERC project. As well, the pre-screening is the total, so if I may speak about the ecosystem that our agency is creating for ERC potential applicants. So in time, it will be like 5 minimum months to go through all these processes. And comparing with that, the successful proposal typically require about from 6 to 8 months of preparation. We may advise our researchers to prepare the application for NHD for NARD support funding within 1 month. About after that, within 3 months to benefit from visit or from exchange of best practices in a European institution, and before the submission in this amount of time to prepare the proposal, the project proposal, and after that to submit the proposal to NCP Wideranjet pre-screening services. So our advice is to start early, because a good proposal needs strong work and needs concentration and needs time to be prepared for. So that was for my side. If any question, I'm here to answer.
Thank you very much, Aurelia, and thank you for that clear overview of what you offer in the in the Horizon Europe office. And I think, for all of the researchers that are here online, as Aurelia set out really clearly, your first point of contact should always be the national contact point. So always contacting their office if you're thinking of writing and submitting an application. So we now have some time for questions and answers. And the first question, which I see on screen from Ellie, actually, Aurelia, this is essentially part of the things you've already mentioned in terms of the follow-up workshops, mentoring opportunities to develop ERC proposals in the region. So Aurelia already set out the support which our office offers. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add on that, Aurelia.
Actually, here, let's say I'm not the only person that is in the position to help. Vitaly Moraru is the head of the National Horizon Europe program office here in Moldova, and we together may give some specific or individual consultancy on that. In cases we are not able to respond to a potential applicant, we are trying to get help from abroad and from our network to find a specific answer for the researcher.
Thank you very much. And from our side in the ERC, we will have regular webinars, for example, when the next year's work program, which covers the calls from 2026, which Alexandra mentioned, when that is published, which will be in the summer of this year, we'll hold one, probably two webinars on looking at the opportunities from the work program. And there are many other webinars organized by national contact points across the whole of Europe. So there are plenty of opportunities, but as I say, the first point of call should really be the Horizon Europe office, as Aurelia set out. So maybe if I can turn to Alexandra for the second question in terms of the flexibility of the grants. If awarded, how flexible is the grant in terms of research mobility or changes in the affiliation of the institution?
So as I mentioned, so it's fully flexible. So there's full portability for the grants. So if you would like to change the host institution, you can very easily do so.
Thank you. And indeed, that's used quite a lot. For example, a lot of people when they're applying for starting grants often don't have a full position in terms of a paid position. They're applying with a host institution and apply for their salary as part of their grants. Often when they've received the grant, they're also offered a position which may be at the same institution or a different institution, and no longer need to take their salary from the grant. They can use that money for taking on more research resource from a PhD or a postdoc. And it's about 20% of people in starting grants change host institutions on day zero of their grant. So it's there's full flexibility, as Alexandra sets out. So the third question, is the host institution also evaluating the proposal? I can answer really quickly with that, and the answer is no. So it is not an evaluation criterion. It is something which is not considered in the panels, and it's something which the staff in the scientific department make sure that there isn't any indication that somebody may be considering the host institution. It's clear that the panel decision, there's no evaluation at all. It's not an evaluation criterion. So maybe, Alexandra, if I can turn to you first of all, and then also to Aurelia for tips for PIs who are invited for interviews.
So I would say the first thing is practice, practice, practice. So you should have a clear presentation. Try to get together some colleagues, some peers that can act as your audience and can ask you questions. So you can, like that, you can anticipate any potential questions from the experts in the room. Of course, know your proposal inside and out. Know all your figures and everything, because they could refer to a specific figure on a certain page. You don't want to look like you're not sure. So prepare and practice, I would say.
Aurelia, anything else from your side in terms of tips for interviews?
Yes, maybe ask your colleague. And we are very proud for our proud and well, motivated from our Romanian colleagues that succeeded in a very short time to attract so much ERC grants. So they are our neighbors, our good friends, and you could ask any of them, I suppose, to share them from those experience they had.
Thank you. And I think from my side, I agree fully with practice, practice, practice. But I say the other thing which is important is there isn't a standard interview format. That's a decision of the panel. And some panels may ask you to give a 10-minute presentation, other a 5-minute presentation. Some don't even ask for a presentation. So it is really clear that you need to study very carefully the instructions that you're given when you're invited to step 2 in terms of how the step 2 evaluation will take place. So Alexandra, maybe I come to you first of all. If I have only 8 years of experience in consolidated grants, do I have less chance of receiving the grant?
No, so as I mentioned, the success rate is pretty much flat across the eligibility windows. So you should not, you should not wait till you have more years. Just if you feel ready, if you feel like you have a good project, then you should just give it a chance.
Thank you. And then maybe Aurelia, if I come to you first of all on the next question, given the ERC's strong emphasis on excellence, how can researchers in Moldova position themselves best to compete at the EU level despite structural research limits?
I didn't get this
So in terms of the fact that the research environment in Moldova, there may be some structural problems in terms of infrastructure or equipment, which maybe are not there in other research environments. I think from my side, I would say the first thing is excellence can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Having a great idea is
Yes.
really what's mattered. You don't excite a panel. The thing which excites the panel most is the great ideas. And I think that's the thing which is the most important. And so I wouldn't be too concerned about the research environment as such. It's your idea, which is the thing that's important. As Alexandra's just set out, the host institution is not an evaluation criterion. It's you and your idea that's evaluated, and that's the thing which is the most important. Remember, if you need specific pieces of equipment, you can apply for funding for that. And indeed, if the equipment that you need is over and above the standard grant amounts, as Alexandra set out, there's an additional funding which is available if you need to buy big pieces of equipment or have access to data sets or to have specific particular access to large-scale infrastructures or databases. All of these kind of things are allowed for. Alexandra, anything else I'm missing that you would add to that?
No, that's it. And I mean, I think you should also try to take advantage of any collaboration. So you can visit other collaborators' lab and you get more research experience by being more exposed to other research environments as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you to both of our speakers in the first sessions. We'll move on to the second session of the talks, which is really learning from experience from people who have first-hand knowledge of how the system works, either in terms of an evaluator or in terms of having been a grantee themselves. So I'm delighted that we have Laura Visu-Petra, who's a panel member, previous panel member for ERC grants, who'll give her hints and tips for successful ERC applications. So Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. I will try to share my presentation. Let's hope everything works. And I want to start off by saying that I'm very happy to be here. I also took part in the Romanian ERC Day. So I think these events can inspire and most of all encourage, I think, applicants, because I think there is a sort of I will state from the beginning that I'm coming from the psychology area. Some of my examples will be in that direction. So there is a sort of a psychological barrier that was also evident in some questions that we've had here. And I think there are actual examples of people, including the applicants here, who managed to, and who will talk after me, who managed to go and move past that barrier. And I think it's really worth spreading the news and really building up your application. So I work in Cluj-Napoca at Universitatea Babes-Bolyai, and I run research in individual differences and legal psychology lab. And with regards to my experience, one second, it seems to take a second to change the slide. In the meanwhile, can you see it? Did it change? Okay.
It did, yeah.
So I'm a bit of a veteran, I would say, in the ERC consolidator panel, since I have been 4 times in the SH4 Human Mind and its Complexity panel, twice working as the panel's right hand, or what they call panel deputy chair. Maybe it doesn't exist in all panels. And I've also been involved in some distance examination where for the starting ERC because there are so many applications that sometimes they ask for additional reviewers. So I do have quite some experience with ERC, but also some comparative experience because I've been an evaluator for the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships, which are, I would think, excellent precursors to an ERC experience in various national committees, so I can compare a little bit the mentality from the national research grants with the ERC demands. And also, I can say that I have some experience also as a panel chair. There is quite a discrepancy, I would say, as a result of these comparisons between what ERC grants are imagined or they are perceived and the actual reality that I have been a part of. And I think it has been a privilege and it was one of the most intellectually enriching experience I've been through. So a first experience is that, like an analogy, like I'm posting in this comic, that it's a sort of a killer committee that just wants to find some reasons that some projects are not worthy and eliminate them. So this is a first myth. And the second one that I think is even more pervasive is that it's something like a sort of a myth. Like, do you still believe in research grants? Because if, of course, at this high level, they are impossible to reach. So the way I perceived it from within was more like a sort of a treasure hunt in which you have some quite vague guidelines, but you have your fellows, members of the panel to guide you through the process. And you really look for some diamonds, some very good proposals that have great ideas, great people supporting them. So it's the spirit within the panel is more of how can we best find the diamonds in this set of proposals. And I think the most important part is somehow to make your project shine. And how can you do that? So that's why I think we were invited here. Some comparisons with what other people, what you might be more familiar with. Of course, all of us apply to the national competitions. For the national competitions, we are often taught to somehow have a lot of background for what we do. And sometimes it feels like it's very safe ground to just propose a little bit of an extra step from what you've done so far. And unlike these national competitions, of course, it's very good to be an expert in your area, to have published relevant work, but it seems like the search is more for something groundbreaking and not just an incremental progress, not just something that adds or makes a little change to your previous work. It's not quantitative, and I think that was mentioned before. Nobody in the panel is counting how many publications you have, how many times you've been invited as a keynote speaker. So never, ever did we have any kind of very strict quantitative rules. Also, it's not an algorithmic process. And I think here what Martin said before was very relevant, that there is no perfect recipe for the interview. Or no matter if some individuals who have managed to gain an ERC grant, or even some companies would want to make you believe that there is this sequence of steps that you need to follow. I think there is no such thing. And in psychology, we have a concept called terror management theory. So of course, we want to manage the unknown that we are facing, but there is no actual step-by-step recipe. What you can find, and that has been very useful, I think, to post some stories of success, for instance, and you will hear a couple after me. Also, there are some ERC classes that are very useful, and of course, your national contact points, as you've heard. The main person is the investigator, and you've heard about portability. And of course, time is essential, and time is really reflected not just in your application, but also in your interview if you are lucky to get to the second stage. So it's not the type of application that you can prepare in 1 month or something like that, even if you have a great idea. And of course, as it has been suggested before, various rounds of feedback from peers, from colleagues. I think the initiative with ERC mentorings is still happening, because I've been contacted even this year to act as a mentor for someone in a different country. So you can also apply for that, for some more direct feedback from someone who has some experience. And of course, as you've heard before, some specifically directed initiatives for people from the Widera network. And also, I think it's very important from a practical point of view not to see it as a waste of time. I think that has also been something that I've often heard, including at my university, that it's not a point in applying because you are just wasting your time. So there is no guarantee that it will be a success. But at the same time, getting your ideas in the shape of a good application, it means you will have a lot of materials to reuse. And of course, there are some rewards. I don't know, maybe you can learn if there is something similar in Moldova, but we have some grants that are awarded nationally for the people who dared to try and apply. And it sets you up for some very good collaborations. There are researchers in your field whom you might not have known, but whom you can contact and talk to about your proposal. And of course, it's very good feedback. It's always detailed feedback, not just from the panel members, whom, as you've heard, act as generalists, but also from specialists in your area if you get to the second stage. So there are a lot of benefits in daring. I here just posted a snapshot of the ERC classes, which I think are very useful. And now for the practical tips. How can you make your, I would emphasize the part B1, because by far it is the most important element in your application. Of course, later on the interview and part B2 become relevant, but you want to really make a case from your first attempt. And you have the extended synopsis for those 5 pages, make them matter. And of course, you have to convince about the feasibility and the brilliance of your project. And then there is the factual part where you explain how your achievements can be linked to your current idea. And one important part is to always look for updates. For instance, I haven't been an active member for 1 year, and some important changes have happened, and the ERC is constantly updating this. So for instance, I noticed 2 important changes: the high risk, high gain, which was like an important, a hallmark criterion for evaluation, has been replaced with terms like ambitious, creative, and original. But that doesn't qualitatively change them. It just makes them a little bit less ambiguous and confusing. And also the criterion of the development of novel methodologies, which was a question in the second step, has been removed because, of course, it is helpful, but it is not necessarily and not sufficient to have new methodologies for a qualitative proposal. So, of course, the idea is to always update and look at the latest information or ask about it, because there might be some changes from 1 year to the next. And now some practical tips for the proposal. So first, we are asked whether the proposal addresses important challenges. What does this mean? And maybe this differs from branch to branch a little bit, from field to field, but overall they have to be both scientifically and epistemologically important. So a research question that is well formulated. It is excellent if they have a societal impact, but it's not an applied grant. So it is not somewhere where you start with, I don't know, 2 pages of this explaining how it will make some improvements to the EU budget if you apply this. So it can be a very brave idea. It doesn't need to have a very high applied relevance. It is useful, of course. And then, to what extent are the objectives ambitious and beyond the state of the art? I think that's one of the core elements where you have to prove your worth. It starts with how well you know your literature. So first, if we see projects which are anchored in a very outdated literature or are very partial to one direction, they only present the literature from one view or one point of view probably that supports the project, that can be seen as limited. And you think that the panel members act as generalists, but often you run into panel members who are also a little bit of a specialist in your area, or we do our research, we do look at the state of the art literature. So it's good to have to show that you know your literature and also how you extend it, how you take it further. But as you've heard before, I think it's good to avoid over-ambitious statements, too bold statements, especially if they are not grounded in the existing literature. And it's very welcome to have interdisciplinary methods or approaches, but it doesn't mean that you have to have like 10, just putting in there 10 methods will somehow make your application more appealing. And I think that's very relevant, for instance, for the human mind and its complexity panel, where often some applicants just bring in neuroscience and psychological and very AI-driven application. It's not always improving the quality of the idea, it's just multiple methods. Then, of course, we eliminated the high risk, high gain term, but what does ambitious, creative, original mean? And I think that we still have to be careful about the distinction between risk that is operational, so something that seems very difficult to achieve even if you have the resources, and that's not the kind of risk that you are looking for. And the conceptual risk, it means it can be something that is has not been researched before, and that one is of interest if it's not just what was called a fishing expedition. So we just want to go there and use a lot of data, but we don't have anything in mind what is going to emerge from it. And then feasibility, of course, has to be very specific. Your research plan with examples, with tasks, with ways of achieving them. And it helps a lot if you have some preliminary findings. So this does not make your project incremental. If you have some preliminary findings or a method that you've already piloted, even if you haven't developed a novel methodology. And of course, you have to clearly justify and show that you have a timeline in mind and how to spend your resources, but you don't have to rely on very standard forms. Even here, like in the Marie Curie, you always have to include the Gantt chart. Here, you can do it or not, depends how you spend those 5 pages. Then some tips for showcasing yourself as a PI. We have some questions that guide you, so always look at what the reviewers have it as questions. And I can share as tips that it's very important not to just list achievements, just have a list of the 10 publications or some conferences where you've been invited, or it's very important to also describe them and also have a sort of a narrative that even if you move from one field to another, you can explain how what you've done in the previous field can help you and can prove that you are sort of the right driving forces, as I put at 3, that you are ideally not just located, because as we've seen, the institution is not the main criterion, but just ideally positioned to somehow conduct this kind of research. It helps if you can show some mobility, some networking. It's not a necessary criterion, but it shows that you had some interactions with other researchers. As we've heard, you don't need to be a formal supervisor, but if you apply for a consolidator grant, it's good to show that you helped some young researchers grow. It can be as much as something that you prepare in your own university, and I think we all have these lab meetings or something to show that you can manage a team. The independence of creativity, your publications, funding, any position in which you had some leadership, and as we've heard before, being transparent. about what happened if you had the change of career, some potential gaps. It's very useful to have it. And my last word of encouragement or advice comes from a researcher who won the Nobel Prize and who was in the behavioral economics field with strong roots in psychology. And he says, which I think is very relevant, a form of optimism is essential to success. I have yet to meet a successful scientist who lacks the ability to exaggerate the importance of what he or she is doing, and someone who lacks a delusional sense of significance will wilt in the face of repeated experiences of multiple small failures and rare successes. So I think it's very good to have this optimism, and a lot of people who dared really got some credit and some trust from the ERC in their ideas. Thank you. And I will try to get to the questions session as well, but if not, I will answer to your questions after. Thank you.
Laura, thank you very much for that very clear and clear overview of tips and techniques. I think it was really excellent to hear it from the point of view of a panel member. So thank you very much for that, and also for the clear enthusiasm you have for the ERC process, which is also good to hear in terms of its clarity and its transparency. The questions and answers session is open, so if people want to ask questions already in Slido, you can do so. The code is here, but we'll have the presentations from the testimonials from the two grantees first of all, before we come back to the questions and answers session. So think about your questions. You can already submit them through Slido. But now I'd like to turn to existing ERC grantees. So first of all, if I'd like to give the floor to Alida Timar-Gabor, who will give you our overview of her experience of being an ERC grantee, both from a starting grant and now more recently from her consolidated grant. So Alida, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Do you see my slides? Yes, perfect. So my presentation is actually entitled More Than a Decade of Blue Skies, because I want to emphasize that ERC aims at funding fundamental research. So this is blue sky research, and it's frontier research, and it likes to fund hypothesis-driven projects. There have been many good tips already given. So the presentation of Laura was excellent, and also of Alexandra. So I will manage to maybe catch a little bit of time. So I had an ERC starting grant starting 2016, and I'm currently the PI of Consolidator grant. Who am I? Well, I come from the physical and engineering panel. I'm a geochronologist. I'm a physicist by formation, an earth scientist by further training and interest. I'm a professor and I'm a mentor, and I have funded and currently lead the luminescence electron spin resonance dating laboratories, as well as the microscopy laboratories at my university, Babes-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca. And this was 90% due to ERC funding. At the heart of these labs, it was also all the time a team. So it was always the team and the lab first. And I think this gave me an upper hand. It was mentioned that, of course, it's not important to show mentorship when you apply as a starting grantee, but I think it helped me a lot. I have collaborations in more than 20 countries, and I owe to my team and these collaborators very much, but I will not have time to name them now. So ERC's motto is by researcher to researcher, so always science first. Think scientifically and write science. They want you to be a little bit out of the box. So please, as mentioned, do not cut down the space you have for science to insert over-elaborated Gantt diagrams, discussing risks, as Laura mentioned, yes, scientific risks, but not operational risks. I mean, you will have excellent funding. So of course, if your computer breaks down, you are supposed to fix it. So that's another thing. And sentences that might apply to any project do not fit into an ERC proposal. So everything needs to be specific. Every sentence should be about your project, and it should be science-based. Also, I think there is a misconception, exceptionally in underperforming countries and Eastern Europe, that the project should be about the host institution, the collaboration, the team, that you should have, especially in your younger part of your career, you should have some mentor involved. This is totally false. The project should be about you, and you should always be in the center of the project. When we are talking, of course, about starting consolidated and advanced grants. Now synergy grants is another topic. So that's very much important. It should be about you. You should be at the center of the research. So not a lot of subcontracting. So you should be on top of everything. This was already mentioned. So what are the questions that the evaluator are being asked? So the project needs to be ambitious, and it should propose new concepts. As it was explained, it was high risk, high gain, but now it's ambitious, and Laura explained this very nicely, so I will not go through it, but I can gladly share the slides. So these are the things that the evaluators are asked to discuss. So again, about the scientific approach, is it ambitious? Is it feasible? Will it develop new methodology? Again, currently rephrases concepts. And to what extent, of course, it is justified what you're asking for. And then is the intellectual capacity and creativity of the PI. It will be rated from exceptional to non-competitive based on the ability to conduct groundbreaking research, have independent thinking, and required scientific expertise. Now, based on my experience, you should be rated 90% as exceptional to be funded in the end. So it's a very competitive scheme. Please keep in mind, as said, that it is fundamental blue skies research. So it's a research driven by our desire to further our knowledge on something and understanding. So it does not need to have an immediate application. Of course, it's nice to be able to have an immediate application, but it's not. So that makes ERC projects special. They are totally bottom up. It cannot be incremental, and as I said, it's very, very competitive. So if you don't succeed, try again. When is the best time to apply? That's a question. And here I will disagree with what the ERC is saying. So the success rate is flat. I understand that, but the number of applicants are much larger in the middle of the eligibility window and at the end of the eligibility window. And of course, you can have a chance at the very beginning of your eligibility window, but I would not necessarily recommend that for countries that are underperforming. But keep in mind that you want to apply again. So do not wait too long. So what I want to say, it's not necessarily the first year, neither the last. you need to ask yourself, so you need to write a narrative CV. ERC adhered to DORA and QARA. So there is certainly not a one-size-fits-it-all profile. You will not count citation and impact factors. I've been funded twice and I do not have a Nature paper, not even today. But you need to be independent. You need to be the one identified for a certain achievement. So you need to have something that makes you special, be it in your little niche. So you should be in close contact with your academic community and able to persuade others that what you have done is to a certain extent at least important. So these are like sentences from at the time I had to apply. I wasn't it wasn't imposed to have a narrative CV, but I did write a narrative part in both of my applications. Now be prepared to write your narrative CV. So these are just examples because I will gladly share the presentation. Now, how to find build the ambition idea? Fostering the idea, in my case, it was about 2 years, and most of those successful will agree with this. Deciding and then preparing, I would say about 1 year. And writing itself, after everything was clear in my head, maybe 1 month, but I'm a fast writer. But keep in mind all these years of filtering the idea. And when I was done, I actually felt that it was my whole career that I have prepared for this. Proposal should be, of course, crystal clear, concise. This was all mentioned. Do not worry too much about details in the budget. I mean, you should be on top of things and know everything in your proposal, but yeah, it should not be like when I hear people that their most concern is the budget, I am thinking, okay, they are not on the right path. So science should always be the most important thing. And think who is your highest authority in your field, and think that you are done when he or she will be fully satisfied. Here I shared the slides that I had for my interview in physical and engineering panel. For the first time, I was allowed to have a 5-minute presentation. Then for the consolidator grant, it was a 3-minute presentation. Now, this is really, really difficult because you need to cover a lot of things in 3 minutes, and there is a big difference between 5 and 3 minutes. And then it's a session of questions that was 25 or 22 minutes in my case, and trust me, it is exactly the time that you're being told. So that's clear. There will be 5 to 10 people asking. So time balance is hugely important. I found this to be like the most difficult thing. Answers should not be too short, should not be too long. You should, you should convince the panel member by your answer, but then you should be careful to be able to reply to other questions that you will be asked, because maybe you will have many questions. I had many questions the second time, the first time not so many, so it depends. Preparation is the key. And I think the most important message would be that at the end of the day, how you handle the question, it's probably more than important than the answer itself, because there will be difficult questions, and the panel's members want to see your intellectual capacity. So at many times it will not be just one answer, and that's the perfect answer that somebody is expecting. Now, at the end, the ones who think of applying will say, oh, 2 years and then training for 3 months for the interview. I had over 30 versions of that 3-minute speech. Well, is it worth it? I mean, is it really worth it? And how can underperforming countries help ERC applicants? Contact your national point, but also contact ERC grantees. Well, I mean, not for any question, but if you will make it to the interview stage, you will have help. I've been in many mock interview panels for colleagues in Italy, in Denmark, in Romania. It was a pleasure. It was intellectually stimulating, and I'm proud that I got my ERC grants, and I'm also proud of these colleagues that I managed to help and were funded. So thank you very much for the blue skies, ERC, and thank you for your attention. And I'm glad to take questions.
Thank you very much, Alida. We'll take the questions after the next speaker, but thank you very much for that really clear, enthusiastic, and very helpful overview of your tips and techniques. I really like the phrase you used, that you present the best version of you. I think that's something which is really important. And I underline something which I think is important, as you say, you are our grantees. We never refer to projects. And so you are our grantees, and we're very proud that you are our grantees. And thank you very much for speaking today. I'd like to turn now to the second ERC grantee who'll give their overview of a testimonial from their side of the ERC application process and their own personal experiences, which is Alexandra Baneu. So Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. The previous speakers have touched upon many things which I would have also included in my presentation. However, I thought about this, so I decided to switch things a little bit and actually start by presenting my project, which is in its last year of existence, and to actually offer a testimonial about what this grant has meant for my career. Mind you, I applied very young. I applied 4 years after finishing my PhD, and I finished my PhD when I was 27. I was 29 when I wrote the project, and I think being so young gave me a lot of courage, because now looking back, I actually can't believe I wrote such an excellent project, and I don't think I would have had the courage to follow the hypothesis that I followed back then. It allowed me to actually work on my own idea. It was always frustrating for me. I worked in research grants since I was 22 years old, and I worked in excellent research grants, but it was always frustrating because I felt, like most young people do, that I could do a better job than the PI, which is not true now that I am an adult and have been through 5 years of experience. However, having a team and being able to follow my own research idea has really helped me grow as a scientist. Also, I had a great team. This is my team at their best, like in 2022, 2023, when there were more of us. Now some of them, unfortunately for me, happily for them, have obtained their own research grants and no longer work in the NOTA project.
Alexandra, sorry to interrupt for a second, but we don't see your slides. I don't know if you're presenting your slides as well.
Yes, I am. Sorry.
We don't see them on our screen.
What do you see?
We just see you.
Oh, okay. Yes, let me share. Sorry.
Actually, your presentation made perfect sense even without the slides, but when you were talking about your colleagues, I thought maybe there were slides too.
Yes,
so
of
see
course.
them now. You just need to pop it on full screen. So
okay.
Perfect. We see it now.
So these are my colleagues. As you can see, they are all Romanians, and this is to disperse a myth that you need an international team. You do not need an international team. You need a team with which you can work very well. A team that you can prove is functional, and I could do that because I had worked with my colleagues in previous grants, so we were already a team when I started the project. Also, if I'm going to say that my project, that only Romanians took part in my project, that would be a lie, because we had a lot of support from international representatives of our community. Actually, so many of them read our articles, gave us advice. Some of them even collaborated in volumes that I coordinated. So some of them actually did more work than my paid colleagues, just because they're very passionate about their work. So we did have a lot of collaborators, but this is the core team. Okay. Why was the project so innovative? First of all, it was a project in the history of the human past, I think. That was the panel I chose. And I study medieval studies, right? And more the history of practices in medieval universities, which is already very interesting. In the past, this type of research had been done starting from legislations. So there are huge volumes about the history of universities, which follow the laws which the university heads had given. And even if we think about our experience now, that can't be right? Because in a university, for instance, a teacher sets out to teach certain texts, right? That's in the description of his course. But very often he doesn't manage to teach everything. He changes the books, things change. So I decided to look at the notes of the students and their notebooks to see what actually happened in the medieval universities, what the practices were, what changed from the official programs. I don't know what students thought about their teachers and wrote on the margins of their notes. So I wanted a more realistic study of this practice. And I had the great luck to sort of be on a wave in my field when everybody was looking at the students and the teachers and their actual notes to see what was happening. So it was a bit with the fashion. I was lucky like that. I'm not sure now a project like this would be so successful because it has already been done quite a lot, and there have been many projects, even ERC projects, which focus on student notebooks funded already. But in 2020, when I applied, I was on the wave of innovators. So it was just such a great idea with a good timing. This is what these notes would look like. This is actually a table of contents, which we often find in student notebooks. So because they tended to want to reuse the material, they sort of wrote out at the end of manuscript unit, they wrote out what they could find in that manuscript unit. And one of our more, I wouldn't say it's the best result, but it's one of the most pleasant visual, is a database with notebooks from students from the 14th and 15th centuries. So that if anybody wants to take our research further, they can find a list of all of these manuscripts, and they can also have different visualizations. For instance, one can see which authors are in a certain manuscript, or by maps, timelines, etc. So this is what we did to further research in our field, because we couldn't obviously study all the 90 manuscripts which we identified as student notebooks, but we only focused on 6 or 7 case studies which we were more interested in. Now, I'm going to give a few tips and tricks for a successful ERC applications, but really fastly, because the previous speakers have done such a great job. So this is what everybody said, that an idea has to be big and it has to justify 5-year funding. If you don't know what such an idea would look like in your field, just look at the site Cordis Europa and see what other people are doing, what other projects are being funded in years close to your application. I would like to underline the fact that projects that propose editions are not funded, and I think this is a problem with the idea of innovation and the way the ERC defines it. And I'm always going to say that because I'm partially a philologist and I work in critical editions. And actually, a critical edition can be really innovative. It's not just existing knowledge, it's new knowledge. It can change real paradigms. For instance, you can think that in the 14th century, somebody was following a certain author, but in addition can show that he was following another author who was quoted by the other author. So in that moment, you change the whole paradigm of that century. You see that a different author was important, not just, not, I don't know, to give an example, Duns Scotus or Thomas Aquinas, but somebody who was actually copying Duns Scotus, but also had some ideas of his own. So it's really, really important. And I think the ERC could fund critical editions because they start from manuscripts that's not known knowledge. It's a whole discussion. So part B1 should be catchy, clear, and explain to specialists in other fields why the project is important and worth financing. I'm going to insist on the fact that before submitting it, you should have your friends read it, your friends from other fields, because that helps a lot. I rewrote my project thanks to the observations made by my friends. For instance, a logician from Bucharest, logic is a subfield of philosophy, read my project, and she said that my arguments were lacking because I tended to give examples in order to argue for ideas and not just for illustration. That happens because I'm more of a philologist. And I think the fact that I changed that sort of gave more scientific credibility to my project. So part B2 is destined for specialists. And they say not to use exact phrases and formulas from B1. I included this because it's a good rule. I didn't respect it. So my B2 was just my B1, to which I added extra arguments, examples, a timeline, and a more elaborated methodology. Then I have a few tips and tricks. You should use the ERC jargon, well, not necessarily high risk, high gain anymore, but all the other things, you should try to use them in your project very intentionally, because the evaluators like seeing that you read the call for the grant, at least. I also I went really far in my project with quoting contemporary sources, because I even quoted some colleagues which were in the same competition as me. Then I have this more of a philosophical advice for whenever you have to write a project. And this is taken from Plato's Meno. And it's the idea that you have to prove that you know something, but also that you don't know anything, because knowledge is not possible without knowing anything, right? But also nobody will finance your project if you say that you know everything. So you have to sort of show the evaluators this sort of equilibrium in which you say, okay, I know something, which is necessary for knowledge, paradoxically, but I still need to find out a lot more things, and this is why I would need funding from the ERC. Also, my experience has shown me, because that evaluators like it when the team members are named in part B2. I mean, that's what all of my evaluators agreed upon. They liked that I named my team, and they liked the fact that I had worked with them previously. I guess that speaks to the feasibility of the project. I don't know why they liked it so much, but it was very well received. And okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, again with some really helpful tips and techniques. And also clearly your enthusiasm for your project and the ERC process. So thank you very much for that. We'll turn now to the final questions and answers sessions, where we already have some questions which come back to you. And I think the first ones are addressed to both of you. So maybe if I can take it in the order of Alida first and Alexandra second. Looking back, was there something you wish you'd done differently, and what might have impacted your research in a better way? We'll go to Alida first.
It's always when you do research, you realize that there are things that you haven't taken into account. So when I actually started my second grant, I realized that there is much more work to do. There were things that I haven't taken into account, but yeah, I have contingency for that. If the question is if my career path would have been better by making other choices, my answer would be no. I'm happy with my choices.
Thank you. And I'd actually interpreted the question perhaps more in terms of the application process, but it's true. It's perhaps
well, I applied. I got it from the first time, both times. So I cannot comment on that. But please be aware that it is extremely common to get it only the second time or the third time. There are people who apply 7 times. It's like the ambition.
Thank you. So, Alexandra, the question's just gone off screen, so let me read it to you again. Looking back, was there something that you wish you would have done differently, and which may have impacted your research in a better way?
Yes, I wish I would have been more organized. Right, once the project started, I'm a bit chaotic, and I said I only became really organized by the 3rd year of the grant, and I wish I would have been more efficient.
Okay, thank you. There's a question which comes in terms of, is it possible to obtain consolidated grants without getting a starting grant? The clear answer is yes. But maybe if I can turn to Laura to give an overview in terms of what the evaluators look for in the terms of the track record of the applicant.
Yeah, so I think having a previous grant can be both an asset and also something that might be a little bit of a difficulty if you follow too closely the idea from the previous grant. So of course it's an important asset if you manage to have a starting grant like Alida had and previous people, but the panel will really look if in the consolidator grant you have a new and fresh idea. And I think I can say that there were several instances in which people just developed a little bit the ideas they had from the starting grant, and the evaluators actively looked and at the outputs, and they saw if there is a qualitative enhancement. So I would say not only is it not necessary, of course it can help, of course it gives you more credibility, but also if you have one, be careful that your next project is not just a little step up the previous one. So that was my experience. Not everyone had a starting grant. I think more than half didn't have a starting grant of the consolidators. It's just a rough estimation and just in my panel. And some from the starting were a little bit carefully looked at to see what is the progress from that grant.
A very wise advice. Thank you very much, Laura. Alexandra, Alida, anything you'd like to add from your point of view in terms of the career trajectory in terms of applying for grants?
Yes, well, clearly you can get a consolidator grant without having a starting grant. But at the consolidator level, I think people do expect you to have some research management experience, which can be, of course, a national grant or something in that regard. When you have a starting grant and then you apply for a consolidated grant, ERC says we are not continuous funding. So as Laura nicely mentioned, I was very much aware that I should totally change what I'm doing. I mean, totally. Of course, you have your core expertise. It's not like you're totally changing yourself, but the subject had to be, I actually have to switch totally.
Thank you.
The subject of the research.
Thank you. We have 3 other questions. I think if it's okay with our speakers, we probably have time to take all 3. Is that okay for you? So maybe if I move to the next question, which is the importance of the track record section in the evaluation. especially for earlier career researchers with limited international exposure. Maybe I can turn to our grantees first of all, from how they did it, and then go to Laura from looking at how the evaluators look at it. So maybe, Alexandra, if I can come to you first.
Yes, sure. I had very limited experience. I didn't have great publications. I had good publications, solid publications, but not great. What I think counted was that I wrote my presentation, that narrative that Alida mentioned. I wrote it like a story about a character whose entire academic life had led her through this project and to leading this project. You know, it was sort of a Bildungs, not a Bildungsroman because it wasn't that long. And I think that counted. It was a really good piece of writing in itself and convincing.
Thank you. And if I come to Alida with the same question, from your perspective, how did you approach that?
You don't need to be stellar, but I would say yes, it matters. You need to have some proof that you're capable. So I would say that the application matters more, but of course the track record and the CV also matters. I mean, when I applied, to be brutally honest, I took, in both cases, I took the list of those who previously got grants in my panel the year before, and I checked all their CVs, you know, and there is a certain, I mean, there are exceptions, but there is, I recommend people doing that. I mean, there is a certain level at which you should be in order for your chances to be maximized.
Thank you. I think that's a very useful tip. Laura, if I can maybe come to you in terms of how the evaluators look at this.
Yeah, so I would say I resonate very well with the opinion stated before. Of course, there is a sort of a royal path where you have those stellar CVs and the best publications in the best environment, and there the evaluators focus a lot on the idea, and it has to be something that is convincing. But the fact that you don't have a stellar track record, yet you have some evidence of international publications, and the track record is a wider concept. So it just doesn't mean just in what journals you've published, what impact factor they had, and some other very easily quantifiable elements. It means also your networking. It means if you had some research stages at other universities, that helps. But just to say, when you don't have an impressive track record, I have witnessed exceptions in which people were not super convincing with their CV, but they had a great idea, so they were at least invited to the interview stage. So there, of course, there are differences. Some people seem to master that good idea, some seem to not do it so well, but at least I can tell you that there have been people who had a very starting, and especially at the start, I wanted to say that there is also a difference in philosophy between the starting grant and the consolidator. So for the starting, there were sometimes just a little bit of creativity evidence and some publications, not zero. And of course, that's also a criterion. But for the consolidator, as Alida said, a little bit of experience of managing some funds, some people is usually required, but the idea is definitely more important than your track record. So don't hesitate, but also take the advantage if you have 1 year or 2 years to build up your CV a little bit before applying. That helps a lot. So if you are in the beginning of the time window in which you apply, you can use those years wisely and make a stronger track record before you do. That matters, of course.
Thank you very much, Laura. Very wise advice. And I can say from my perspective, having observed many different panels, I've seen many panels get incredibly enthusiastic and excited by an idea, I don't remember seeing panels getting excited or enthusiastic by a CV. It's the ideas which excite them first of all. So I think that's the thing which is the most important. The last two questions are actually personal questions. So the first one to Alexandra. Alida mentioned the interview was perhaps the most difficult stage in the application process, or more the most challenging stage in the application process for her. Was that also your experience?
No, because I was in the 2020 evaluation, and the ERC did not have time to set in place new interviews. So I didn't have an interview. That's the point. I didn't have an interview because it was that summer.
It was the time of COVID. Yes, that's true.
Yes.
So that was the thing where it was perhaps a slightly different situation. I understand. Okay. And then finally to Alida, there's a question in terms of their CV. I was an assistant professor before in China. Does the mentoring and supervision that they've undertaken there benefit me, and should I list them in my CV?
Yes, certainly. Of course, any achievement that is relevant can be listed. Just do not be aware that ERCEA adhere to DORA and QARA, so no impact factors and citations, but anything qualitative, it can be mentioned.
Thank you very much. Very clear. And I'd like to thank the three of you for taking the time to come and share your experience and your knowledge with this group of potential applicants. I hope you've inspired many people who are thinking of applying to actually do put in applications. So thank you very much to the three of you. And indeed, thank you to the speakers from the previous sessions, to Alexandra and Aurelia as well. And then finally, I'd like to thank all of the participants who are here today. We really hope this has inspired you to put in applications. We would actually like to see more applications coming from Moldova and indeed from all of the widening countries. So really, we hope that this is a first taste which has inspired you to put in that application, get in contact with your national contact point, start doing the preparation of your applications as Alexandra and Alida set out the process which they went through. And I think they were very good processes for you to follow and to model. I'd also like to thank my colleague and co-chair, Monica, but actually all of the questions were in English and not in Romanian. So I didn't have to call on Monica for her co-chairing of the questions and answer session, but thank you, Monica, for being available to do that. Just so that you all know, online, the recording of this webinar and all the presentations will be available on our website in a couple of days. So if there are aspects that you want to revisit or if you want to share with colleagues, then you'll be able to do so. They'll all be available on our website. And then before I finally close, in Slido, you will see that there is a feedback questionnaire. It's always very useful for us to get a typo there, the satisfaction. I'm sure it will be a satisfactory survey, but we'll just correct that typo. So it's a satisfaction survey, so we can get an overview of what you viewed of the webinar and things which perhaps could be done differently or better in the future.